And I appreciate it. Let me just say up front on this issue of athletic departments investigating sexual assault allegations, that is ridiculous. You've got to get and fix that right away. I am a proud graduate of the Penn State University, and it's obviously it was so troubling and disappointing to see what happened at my university. I love the university, but the athletic department is not where you handle these kinds of allegations. So you've got to fix that, Dr. Emmert. Walk out this door and fix that. What I'm troubled about when I hear, the testimony today, and I just need to understand, Senator Blumenthal asked about the change to an employer-employee model. We've talked about compensation potentially for athletes today. I don't want to see any athletes mistreated. I want them to be able to have a quality of life that's important as they serve and get the education and be able to be an athlete, the student-athlete model. But as I think about what, for example, the NLRB did in its ruling, I know it applies to private universities allowing unionization at Northwestern, and I think about this compensation model, the employer-employee model. What does this do in terms of the schools where we're not talking about the top athletes that may go on that are the revenue-generating sports? And what will that do to women's athletics? If we start down the road of a compensation model, what will happen in our schools in terms of the schools that or the sports that aren't at the top, where those athletes, you can sell the jerseys, you can make money, but are still very important to student life? And when I think about Title IX and women and the opportunities women have gotten because of Title IX, if you're on campus and this suddenly becomes an employer-employee type model, what does that do for the women's sports if they're not revenue generating? And how do we sustain them if this model changes? So it's a big question, but I would like you all to comment on it, because the last thing I want to see is I want to make sure that our athletes are treated well. And certainly, Mr. Roll, what you've done, it's really inspiring to see what you've done. And thank you, Mr. Ramsey, as well, for your inspiration to being here. But there's a whole category of athletes that weren't quite at your level, but are participating in college sports, and it's been an opportunity for them to get an education, and for women as well, that are at your level, but don't always, our sports don't always generate the same amount of revenue, and I want to make sure that women still have the opportunity that they've had because of Title IX. So if you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
I would love to comment on that. I think it's not a zero-sum game. If some athletes are profit athletes who have a higher market value than the cost of their grant and aid, then we should treat them differently than athletes who are not profit athletes. It's not either or they must be. If they're employees, as the NLRB found, then we should treat them as employees. That does not mean that college athletics or athletes in other sports, women or anything, it doesn't.
Well, can I tell you?
It's not an either or.
Can I tell you, Doctor, my university said that if the unionization rule were applied, University of New Hampshire, that they feel like this is actually going to diminish the athletic program, and will diminish it for women, will diminish it for non-revenue generating sports. So I understand what you're saying, but that's sort of not what I'm hearing from some other universities.
Well, I would say that probably a university president by the name of Chicken Little might have been the first one to say that, because the sky will not, in fact, fall. By denying profit athletes just compensation in the market does not preclude colleges and universities from supporting intercollegiate athletics as an educational opportunity. If they're employees, then they should have all the rights of employees. It does not, Title IX does not apply in an employee setting.
Well, I would like to see what Mr. Bradshaw has to say about what I just said as well. Thank you.
We probably don't have time, but I certainly would like to hear that model that works. I believe it's going to be devastating to all those student athletes, including women, who don't produce revenue, who aren't seen as athletes or students who create that revenue. I really would like to see that model work, because as we all know, that's going to mean those who can afford to pay for that will, and those who can't won't.
Thank you.
Again, if I could reiterate, and I appreciate the question, and I'm trying to articulate it as clearly as I can. If the athletes are in fact employees, then we have a moral obligation and an obligation under the law to treat them as such. If they're not, does not preclude them from participating. Title IX does not have to be held hostage by this, because we're only talking about 5% of the athletes.
So I know my time is up, and I know others have to ask questions, but so we're just going to have a distinction. So some will be employees and some won't, and some will be student athletes.
They already are employees.
I don't see how that works.
They already are employees. So by being open and honest about what we are using and exploiting these athletes for, honesty is a very good thing.
So as a woman athlete, if I'm not a revenue generating athlete, then I'm not going to be eligible for this employee-employer relationship, and so then there's sort of a second category of athletes on campus.
They already have that.
Bothers me.
We refer to them as revenue athletes right now, and revenue sports and Olympic sports. And that's fine. It does not mean that if we compensate athletes according to the market, that everyone else has to go away. That is not what has to occur at all.
Mr. Chairman?
So if the universities find that that opportunity is very important, they will still support it. They will still support it. I see no way that women's athletics or Olympic athletics is going to go away. It's not going to happen.